Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today's episode isn't going to be like some of the others. This is going to be more of a travel guide, as I'm going to cover 2 chapters in just one video, as there's not really much to discuss here other than the placement of the characters. And what little there is to discuss can be folded into a discussion also of the next story, that of Maeglin. So, here we go. The thing that we must first take note of is how, in the north of the world, Melkor had raised the arid Engren, the Iron Mountains, in order to fence them around his citadel of Autumno. And that the arid Engren stand in the west, and where they're bent back northwards, and he built himself a fortress there also, of which we know the name of is Angband, the Hells of Iron. The most noteworthy towers of his fortress are Thangorodrim, that were made of ashen slag, and of course we have filth and desolation that's spread southward by Melkor, which these plains are called the Ardgallan, and a rich grass did grow there in time during the siege, but they were likely destroyed after Melkor broke the siege. To the west of Thangorodrim is where you might find Hisilome, the Land of Mist. It's named by the LOTR because of clouds that Morgoth sent in that direction during their first encampment. And it's also known by the name of Hithlum in the tongue of the Sindar. And remember this name because it's going to be very important. And further west, you have the arid Loman, the echoing mountains. And to the east and south, you have the curve of the arid Wethrin, the shadowy mountains that end up being to one side of the Ardgallan and the Vale of Sirion. Fingolfin and Fingon are to hold on to Hithlum, and a lot of Fingolfin's people end up dwelling in Mithrim, near the shores of the Great Lake. And Fingon was assigned Dorlomin, which is west of the mountains of Mithrim, with their main citadel being at Aethel Sirion in the east of Ered Wethrin. And they're there because they're keeping watch over Ardgallan, and because their cavalry are some of the best around. As we'll see in a later chapter, Fingolfin himself is a cavalry commander, and one of great note, whom the rest of his people are almost holding him back. He's so mighty. So, yeah, take note of this fact. It'll be important later. To the west of Dorlomin, beyond the Echoing Mountains, and south is the Firth of Drengist. And further inland you have Nevrast. This signifies the hither shores in the Sindarin tongue. I'm going over these details, as said, because this is a travelogue chapter. Very important. And I hope you all don't mind, as said, that I trace this across 2 chapters. Now, back to the tour guide. Nevrast went to Turgon, who built there along the shore Vinyamar. Further south of his lands, you would find those of Círdan. And in those lands, you have Brithambar and Eglarust, who are major points to take note of. You have the river Sirion, which is to the east, and this one has several branches. And for one thing, we'll explore the river Narog, which is a major focal point for the kingdom of Nargothrond, the kingdom of Finrod Felagund. Now, as to the realm east of his, you have the lands of Thingol. the kingdom of Doriath, you might also call it. This is the kingdom of the Sindarin elves, with Menegroth, the thousand-caverned palace of Fingal, being at the center of it. And of course, it's where the Vale of Melian is to be found. And this veil is kind of a protective force field, for lack of a better term, around the forest in which Menegroth finds itself. Now, Brethil lies to its west, and you have Orodreth, who's stationed to the north, with Turgon having moved later to Gondolin, which is to the east of Orodreth's position, and it's located in the encircling mountains. Darthonion is to be found east, and you have Angrod and Agnor, who are stationed to the north of that location. And you have Ered Gorgoroth, which is to be found south of their position. And the Gorgoroth Mountains are rather hostile, as there are giant spiders there, and nobody likes to be around those. Except maybe Samwise, but he's the slayer of spiders, as is Bilbo Baggins. So, unless you have a Hobbit exterminator, you're not going near there. And finally, you have, of course, to the east, the Feanorians, because they're nothing but troublemakers, and you don't want them anywhere near delicate diplomatic matters. Somehow, though, they'll find their way into the west and mucking it up, because it's what they do. That said, you have, of course, the Marches of Maethros, who is stationed the most northerly of all the Feanorians. And of course, he has at his back Maglor to the east of him, well, the southeast. And you have the River Gellion, which is pretty much almost the property of Coranthier. And Coranthier ends up being one of the main guys dealing with the dwarves, so he gets really rich later. Amrod and Amras are, of course, to the west of the River Gellion, but they're kind of to the east and south of sorts of the River Aros and Non Elmoth. Gelagorm and Curufin are to the southwest of Himring, where Maethros can be found. And they are going to be troublemakers later. So, really, this is a very lore and intro-based chapter. And of course, real quick, the Ered Gorgoroth derive their names from being the Mountains of Terror, just so that I include some linguistics, as it's kind of important that I mention the linguistics, as Tolkien was quite fond of those details. And you have, of course, naturally I skipped over some details, and I'm basically summarizing things, as a lot of these details will become relevant in later stories and later parts of the Silmarillion, as it zeroes in on certain areas and events of certain areas. So we will get to know all these different details. And really, these chapters are awesome for lore. But let's be honest, they're best done in a brief manner. Now, for example, what I glossed over are details such as the fortress on Tol Sirion, that of Minas Tirith. And this fortress, which is where Orodreth is, and is where he'll be chased from, because, well, I'll get to that once it's relevant. Trust me, it's going to be an exciting detail. But as it is, let's just real quickly trace the events of the next chapter. Turgon is visited by Ulmo, who decides he's going to let him have the city he really wants. which is to prove the most beautiful in all of Beleriand, the city of Gondolin. Gondolin is going to be very relevant later, but for now, it's only relevant in that Turgon decides to go there, abandoning the city of Vinyamar in favor of, as said, Gondolin. Now, Vinyamar itself was very beautiful, but there he leaves before his departure in a suit of armor and weapons. And the thing is, this is important because there's still a curse on the Noldor, and Ulmo wanted this suit made to the exact measurements of Tuor, son of Huor, who will appear later in this story. Now, while Gondolin is being built in secret, Finrod Felagund decides to dig deep into Nargothrond, but visits Doriath, and while on a visit, he discovers one thing. Galadriel let slip to Thingol that, well, what happened in Aqualonde. Thingol's not exactly impressed, but the thing about Thingol is that he's also a pragmatist. Now, Melian is telling him it's no good can come from being allied with the Feanorians, but as she doesn't have a better idea of what to do or who Thingol can really ally with, Thingol just decides, yeah, okay, well, do you have any other allies? Are there any hiding under your skirts? No. So I need the Feanorians right now. I don't like allying with them, but I don't have much choice. Melian doesn't like this and says their swords and their counsels shall have two edges. But it's hard to say what Thingol could have done better. He doesn't exactly have a lot of options. And that's where I don't think he had any other choice. But this doesn't mean that he's willing to let the Feanorians into his kingdom. On the other hand, the Finarfinians also lied to him. So, of course, as I said, Finrod, on his next visit, discovers that Thingol's aware of the lies and untruths said to him. And Finrod is greatly troubled. And Thingol ends up pretty much telling him and Angrod, who spoke bitterly against the Feanorians, get out. And in this, he has the support of Melian, who doesn't really want them around. So the sons of Finarfin are not like the sons of Feanor. They can be bullied. The sons of Feanor would not take this sitting down. But that said, there is a good reason why Thingol is mistrustful of any of the house and all of the House of Finwë, as they have shown themselves to be fairly divisive and self-divided. So he needs to keep his own realm intact, so he dictates that Sindarin is going to be the only language of his kingdom, so that there's cultural values attached to the language, rather like how the French attach values to the language of les Français et la France. So here Thingol is taking a very linguistic-centered policy, and the Noldor have to bow to it, though they do try to preserve their Noldoran tongue. As to Finrod, it is also noted that he continues to pine for his love in Amarie of the Vanyar, in spite of the fact that she refused to accompany him. That said, that'll wrap up this set of chapters, and next time we'll be picking up with the story of Erethel, sister of Turgon, who unwisely ran off to try to play, I guess you could say, girl boss to an extent, to use a modern term. And I realize how unpopular that term is in some circles, and how divisive it can be, but the truth is, Erethel fancies herself to be greater than what she is, and foolishly embarks on a terrible quest. One that would have dire repercussions for her and for Gondolin itself. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you were Morgoth smashing Fingolfin into itty-bitty pieces. And don't forget to also check out my Substack, where I'm writing a variety of Lord of the Rings styled and Ivanhoe styled fantasy serial novels. And I also do scripts and essays such as this one. So do check that out. And remember to have a great day.